Hello and welcome back to Sleepy Informer, isn't it? The place where we play games far, far too slowly and talk about them far, far too quietly, all so that you can drift right off. If this is your first time here, hello and welcome, and thank you for trusting me with your evening. Tonight we're settling into my time at Sandrock, and this one is going to be a nice, long, meandering session, all about building, harvesting, and just a little bit of exploration. Nothing too exciting, nothing too loud, just a gentle wander through a dusty little desert town, and everything it's got tucked away in its corners. So get yourself comfortable wherever you are. Pull the blanket up if you've got one, or don't. If you haven't, that's all right too. Turn the lights down low or off entirely, whatever suits you best. And when you're ready, and only when you're ready, let's tuck you in and let's get down to sleep with my time at Sandrock. So, where we're picking things up is a workshop on the edge of a little town called Sandrock, which sits out in the middle of the Eufaula Desert, which is, as you'd expect from the name, mostly sand, mostly heat and mostly quiet, aside from the odd rocket rooster squawking somewhere off in the distance, and the odd tumbleweed rolling past, minding its own business. The character we're playing as is a builder, which is a licensed trade out here, apparently, and we've come to take over the old workshop that used to belong to a fellow named Mason, who's retiring, off to enjoy his last few days sipping yak milk down at the saloon before he heads off somewhere quieter, if such a thing exists out here. There's another new builder as well, a young woman named Mion, or Mion, I've heard it said both ways. And she came from a place called Highwind, up north somewhere, and she seems awfully sweet, if a little easily flustered. And there's Jan, who runs the Commerce Guild, and who is, and I say this with the greatest of affection, entirely allergic to doing any actual building work himself. He'd much rather sit with his feet up on his desk and tell us all about how busy he is, but that's all right. That's just Jan. Every town needs a Jan, I suppose. Now, the very first thing a builder needs out here is a pick hammer, which is exactly what it sounds like, half pick, half hammer, and it's the tool you'll be using for just about everything in the early going. You can't really cut down trees around here because the desert doesn't grow them back very fast, and the townsfolk get rather cross if you try, quite understandably, water and wood being precious things out here. So instead you go rummaging through the junk piles that are scattered about, and you break down old scrap metal and driftwood that the wind's blown in from who knows where, and that gives you your stone and your wood to get started. So that's what we're doing now, just wandering slowly around the yard, tapping away at these little heaps of rubbish, and watching the resources tick up one by one. It's a nice rhythm, honestly. Tap, 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 and a little pile of wood scrap turns into a stack of proper lumber in your bag. There's something quite soothing about it, I think, watching a mess slowly turn into something useful. I should say, before we go much further, that today has been an absolutely ordinary sort of day for me. Nothing much to report. The kind of day where the most exciting thing that happened was that I found a slightly better brand of tea at the shop, one of those little herbal blends with chamomile in it, and I've been sipping it while we play, and it's rather lovely actually, very soft on the stomach, and it smells a bit like a garden after rain, if that makes any sense at all. I don't know why I'm telling you this, only that it's the sort of thing that tends to drift through my head when I'm doing something slow and repetitive like this, tapping away at rocks, and I thought I'd share it with you, since we're here together for a good while yet. Right, so back to the pick hammer. We've gathered up enough stone and wood now, and if we head over to the work table, which is this sturdy little bench sitting in the corner of the workshop, we can put it together. The work table is where most of your simpler crafting happens, the tools, the early furniture, little bits and bobs, and it's really quite straightforward once you get the hang of it. You just select what you want to make, and so long as you've got the materials, off it goes. So there we are, one pick hammer, freshly made, outstanding quality, which I'm told just means it's about as good as it can be at this early stage, and we're ready to start properly harvesting. The town itself is built in and around the ruins of something much older, something from what they call the old world, before whatever happened, and nobody out here seems entirely sure what that was, only that it left an awful lot of scrap metal buried under the sand, and an awful lot of strange machines half poking out of the ground here and there. It gives the whole place a lovely worn-in feeling, like everything's been patched together with love and a bit of desperation in equal measure. The buildings all have that sort of sun-bleached, sand-blasted look to them, warm oranges and browns, with little strings of lanterns here and there, and the light in the late afternoon turns the whole town this soft, dusty gold color that I find very calming to just sit and look at. So we're wandering out now, past the workshop gate, and there's a little dog trotting about. I believe his name is Nemo, and he seems perfectly happy just following whoever's nearby, tail going the whole time. There's also a camel, an actual camel, wandering around near the train tracks, and apparently she's something of a town mascot, and if you go and talk to her, she just sort of burps at you, which, honestly, fair enough. I'd probably do the same in her position. We're not doing anything terribly important right now, just having a slow walk around, tapping the odd junk pile as we pass it, kicking the occasional patch of sand grass to see what falls out, which is usually just a bit of fiber, sometimes a cactus fruit if we're lucky. There's a fellow named Burgess who looks after the water situation here, since water's about the most precious thing you can have out in a desert like this. And he's very serious about it, very by the book, reminds us gently not to go cutting down any of the town's trees, and not to go wasting water either, which, again, fair enough, seems like sound advice for a desert. He mentioned that you can actually collect dew from some of the plants in the early morning, which then turns into water back at the workshop, which I think is rather a clever little system, using what nature gives you instead of just draining a well dry. We're going to want to keep an eye on our own water tank as we go along tonight, since none of our machines will run without it, and running out partway through a crafting job is the sort of small, mildly annoying thing that happens if you're not paying attention, and we are paying attention, mostly, tonight. Alright, so we've got a decent little stockpile going now, some wood, some stone, a fair bit of scrap, and I think it's time we thought about the recycler. This is the next big machine Jan wants us to build, and it's honestly one of the most useful things you'll make in the whole early game, because it takes all that scrap you've been picking up and turns it into proper, usable resources, copper bars, drags, all sorts. To build it, we need to head over to the assembly station, which is a bigger bit of kit than the work table, over there in the corner, under that rather crooked-looking awning, and it needs a stone trough and a couple of grinding saws before it'll let us assemble the whole thing. So we'll need to make those first, which means a bit more wandering, a bit more tapping at rocks, gathering up diners, which is this fine little mineral dust that comes out of the harder stones scattered about the yard. It's a slow process, and I don't mind that at all, honestly. I think that's rather the point of an evening like this, isn't it? Not rushing anywhere, just letting the little tasks stack up one after another, nice and unhurried. While we're doing this, I keep thinking about my garden, actually. Funny how the mind wanders when your hands, or in this case your thumbs, are busy doing something repetitive. I've got this one pot of mint that's completely taken over its little corner of the balcony, absolutely refusing to share space with anything else I've tried to plant near it, and I keep meaning to repot it into something bigger, and I keep not doing that, and so it just sits there, sprawling a bit further every week, very content with itself. I think there's something to be said for that sort of stubborn, unbothered growth. Mint doesn't ask permission, it just gets on with things. Right, we've got our grinding saws now and our stone trough, so let's head back to the assembly station and put this recycler together properly. There we go. It clunks into place, this sturdy little box of a machine, and we can drop scrap into it and let it work away in the background while we go do other things, which I think is rather nice, having something ticking over quietly behind you while you get on with your day. We'll toss a bit of wood scrap in first, just to test it, and yes, there we are. A bit of proper wood pops out the other end a few minutes later, and a bit of drag dust besides. Jan's asked us to go show him the recycler, or rather, he's told us not to bother, in that particular way he has of being both demanding and entirely uninterested at the same time. And honestly, that's fine by us. We've got plenty else to be getting on with. Let's wander into town properly now, since we haven't really said hello to anyone yet, and there's quite a few faces worth meeting around here. First up is Amira, who runs the ceramic shop. A lovely little place full of pots and bowls and all sorts of pretty glazed things, and she's terribly kind, gave us a little welcome pot as a gift when we first arrived, just because she thought we might be short on furniture, which we were, honestly. There's also Arvio, who owns the general store, and who I think spends rather a lot of his time trying to convince people to buy things they don't strictly need, though he's friendly enough about it, and gave us a discount on our first few purchases, 7 days of half-price everything, which was very generous of him, even if I do suspect an ulterior motive somewhere in there. And then there's Owen, who runs the Blue Moon Saloon, and who cooked us up a proper welcome meal on our first evening here, takeaway dishes and everything. And honestly, I don't think I've mentioned it yet tonight, but I could go for a bowl of something warm myself right about now. Wherever you are, whatever you've got nearby, maybe consider a little snack before you drift off. No judgment either way. We should probably talk to the researcher too, a fellow named Chi, who runs the research center and is, from what I understand, entirely obsessed with old-world technology, robots in particular, though we haven't quite unlocked that whole conversation yet. He's the one who takes those data disks we sometimes find while harvesting scrap and turns them into diagrams for new machines, which is a rather important part of the loop out here, since an awful lot of the good stuff is locked behind having enough discs to trade in. We're wandering past the church now, the Church of Light it's called, run by a minister named Matilda, who's filling in while the actual mayor, Trudy, is off somewhere out in the desert trying to grow things in the sand, which, bless her for trying, though from what everyone says it hasn't gone terribly well so far. There's a fireside meeting most Sunday evenings where the whole town gathers, and it's rather a nice little ritual, everyone standing around in the warm evening light, catching up on town business. Nothing too dramatic, mostly just water levels and whose fence needs mending. Let's slow right down here for a moment, because I think we're coming up on, about 40 minutes or so into tonight's session, and that's usually a good point to just sit for a second and let things settle. So we're going to have our character just stand here for a moment, out by the train tracks, and watch the light change a little, the way it does out here in the late afternoon, everything going soft and orange at the edges. There's no rush at all. We can just sit with this for a little while before we carry on gathering. All right, let's keep going, gently. We're going to head out toward the ruins now, which is where the real harvesting and exploring happens, once we've got a proper pickhammer and a bit of stamina saved up. There's a place called Paradise Lost, this enormous sprawling ruin right on the edge of town, said to be some sort of old-world metropolis buried under all this sand, and it's absolutely riddled with scrap, with old machinery, with the sort of resources you just can't get from a junk pile in the yard. Copper ore, tin, the makings of bronze, all sorts of good things down there, layer after layer of it, and you can go as deep as your stamina allows before you'll need to come back up and rest. Before we can properly get down there though, we're told we'll need a crane lift installed, since there's a rather long drop involved, and apparently a fellow named Rocky, who runs a salvage company out that way, has been waiting on this crane for months now, ever since Mason sort of let the job slip through the cracks before he retired. So that's actually one of our very first proper commissions, building not one but 2 crane lifts, since there's 2 of us builders now, myself and Mion, each one to be installed on either side of this long tunnel Rocky's crew has been working out of. It's a fair bit of work, this one. Needs bricks, wooden sticks, thick rope, copper sticks and bearings, and some of those recipes we don't even have yet, which means a trip to the Commerce Guild store to buy the thick rope pattern, since apparently you can't just work that one out on your own. So we'll wander over there now, nice and slow, past a few more junk piles on the way, tapping at them as we go, filling our pockets up bit by bit. It's rather satisfying, honestly, the way this game lets you just wander and gather without any particular pressure, no clock ticking down aside from the day itself, and even that's forgiving enough if you're not trying to do too much at once, which we certainly are not tonight. We're taking our time, that's rather the whole point. I keep thinking as we wander about how much I like a town that's built into its ruins rather than around them, if that makes sense. There's something a bit hopeful about it, isn't there? Building your little cozy life directly on top of whatever came before, using the bones of an old world to make a new one work, even if it's a bit patchwork and a bit dusty around the edges. I suppose most towns are like that in some way, if you dig back far enough, but Sandrock wears it right there on the surface, doesn't try to hide it at all. We've made it to the Commerce Guild store now, and there's the recipe for thick rope, 16 gold, which is well within our means, so we'll pick that up, along with, oh, let's see, there's a wooden storage recipe here too, which I think we already know. But there's also one for gunpowder, which we're a fair bit short on the materials for just yet, so we'll leave that one be for now. No rush, it'll still be here another day. Right, we've got our thick rope recipe, so let's wander back to the work table and knock a few of those out while we're thinking of it. There we go, 6 of them coiled up neat in the inventory. And we're still going to need wooden sticks and copper sticks and bearings and bricks, of course, for both the crane lift and for one of Heidi's commissions, since she's asked us for some bricks as well, and Heidi, if I haven't mentioned her yet, runs the construction junction, which is where you go to expand your workshop and upgrade all sorts of things later on. Very practical, very no-nonsense sort of person, always got a project on the go. Let's talk about bricks for a moment actually, since we're going to be making an awful lot of them tonight, and this is where the furnace comes in, which we haven't built yet, but really ought to, since trying to get bricks purely from junk piles is slow going, whereas the furnace will let us smelt stone straight into bricks in a proper, steady stream. So let's pop back to the work table and put one together. We've got the stone trough. We need a bit of quartz too, which we can usually find scattered among the harder rocks out and about. There we are, one furnace, sitting nice and snug next to the recycler. We'll pop a power stone in for fuel and load it up with stone. Quite a lot of stone actually, since we're going to want bricks in fairly large batches, both for the crane and for Heidi's commission, and probably a few others besides that'll come along as we go. And there it goes, ticking away, turning raw stone into neat little bricks, one by one, while we go off and do something else for a bit. I think this might be a nice moment for a bit of a tangent actually, since we've got a machine running quietly in the background and nothing terribly urgent to be doing. I was thinking earlier today about my grandmother, actually, who used to have this enormous old kettle, the whistling kind, not electric at all, and she'd put it on the stove every single afternoon, at exactly 3:30, without fail, rain or shine, whether anyone was visiting or not, just for herself, and I always thought that was rather lovely. Having a little ritual like that, something small and unremarkable that you do purely because it makes the day feel shaped, feel like it's got a proper middle to it, rather than just running straight through from morning to night without a pause. I think about that kettle more than I probably should, if I'm honest. I might put mine on in a minute actually, once we've got this furnace sorted. Alright, our bricks are coming along nicely, so let's go gather a bit more while we wait. There's always more scrap to be found around the edges of town, and we haven't really explored much past the water tower yet tonight. Let's wander that way now. There's Burgess again, doing his rounds, keeping an eye on the oasis, which is this little pool of water right at the heart of the town, absolutely essential to the whole place. And there's a modest fence around it just to remind folks not to go trampling through or taking more than their share. We're picking up a few more resources as we go, some sandgrass, the odd cactus, being careful not to go anywhere near the actual trees, since that's the one thing everyone out here seems to get properly cross about. There's a chap fishing out by the oasis edge, and apparently sand fishing is its own whole little activity out here, quite different from ordinary fishing, something to do with throwing bait into loose sand and waiting for the fish to surface, and then tossing a trap over them at just the right moment. We haven't got a trap made yet, so we'll leave that one for another evening, but it's nice to know it's there, waiting for us, another slow little activity to fold into future sessions. Let's check back on the furnace now, since it's probably had a fair bit of time to work through that stone. Yes, there we are, a good healthy stack of bricks sitting ready, more than enough for the Crane and Heidi's commission both, with a bit to spare for later. We'll drop off Heidi's bricks first, since that's the quicker of the two tasks, and she seems very pleased about it, plus reputation, plus a bit of gold, and a small tick upward in how she feels about us, which I gather matters a fair bit as this game goes on. These little relationship meters ticking up with every kindness, every completed favor. Now, onto the crane lift itself, which is going to need us to head into that scrapyard area near Paradise Lost, since Rocky mentioned there's a free week's pass waiting for us there, and plenty of loose scrap to rummage through besides. Let's wander that way now, nice and unhurried, past the last few buildings on this side of town, out toward where the desert really opens up and the ruins start poking up out of the sand like the ribs of something enormous and long since gone quiet. It's rather a striking view, actually, if you stop and look at it properly, which we're going to do now, just for a moment. This great sprawl of broken old-world architecture half swallowed by dunes, with the town's little rooftops clustered small and warm in the distance behind us. There's something quietly moving about it, I think, the scale of what came before set against the scale of what people have managed to rebuild since, small and patient and stubborn as that mint plant on my balcony. All right, let's carry on gathering. There's scrap everywhere out here, proper piles of it, and we're filling our pockets steadily as we go. Copper scrap, mechanical bits, the odd bit of rubber that we can't quite break down yet without a stronger tool. We'll come back for that later, once we've upgraded our pick hammer a bit. For now, we're just taking what we can get, nice and slow, one junk pile at a time. I think it might be worth pausing again here for a moment, just to check in on how you're doing, whoever's listening. If you're still awake, that's perfectly all right. There's no rush at all. We've got a good long way to go yet tonight, and sometimes it takes a little while for the mind to properly let go of the day. If you're already drifting, well, that's the whole point, isn't it? And I hope it's a gentle drift, nothing sudden, just a slow settling, like sand finding its way to the bottom of a jar of water. We're going to keep gathering scrap here for a good while longer, since we need quite a lot of mechanical parts for the bearings that go into this crane lift, and mechanical scrap seems to be a bit more scattered than the plain stone and wood varieties, tucked away behind bits of old fencing, half buried under drifts of sand in the corners of the yard. Tap, tap, tap. There's a nice rhythm to it, isn't there? And I find my mind keeps wandering off to little unimportant things while my hands, or thumbs, do the actual work. I was thinking actually about how I used to collect stamps as a child, which is a terribly old-fashioned hobby, I know, and I don't think I ever really understood what I was doing with them. I just liked the way they looked lined up in their little album. All these tiny pictures from places I'd never been and probably never would go. Lighthouses and birds and old kings I couldn't have named if you'd asked me. I don't collect stamps anymore, haven't in years, but there's something about this sort of slow, patient gathering in a game like this that reminds me of it. The quiet satisfaction of watching a collection grow, one small piece at a time, without any particular hurry to finish it. Right, we've got a proper stack of mechanical scrap now, so let's toss some into the recycler back home once we're there and see what comes out. For now, though, let's keep exploring a little, since we haven't gone very deep into these ruins yet tonight, and there's meant to be all sorts down there, old-world relics, ore deposits, the odd bit of treasure tucked into forgotten corners. We'll want to be a bit careful with our stamina here, mind, since running about down in the ruins does drain it rather more quickly than pottering about the surface. And we don't want to run ourselves right out before we've made proper use of the evening. So we'll go down a level, have a look around, tap a few of these promising-looking deposits, and then think about heading back up before we push things too far. There we are, down into the first level now, and it's rather atmospheric down here, isn't it? All these old corridors and fallen pillars, half lit by whatever daylight manages to filter down through the cracks above. We can hear the faint hum of some old machine somewhere off in the distance, still ticking over after who knows how many years, and it gives the whole place a sort of sleepy, half-alive feeling, like the ruins themselves are dreaming. We're finding a fair bit of stone down here, and some copper deposits too, good rich ones by the looks of things, so we'll spend a little while just working through them, nice and steady, filling up our pockets. There's the occasional old-world crate as well, which sometimes has something useful tucked inside, a bit of scrap, occasionally a data disk, which we'll want to bring back to Chi at the research center when we've got a few collected. I think we've gathered a good amount now, and our stamina's starting to dip a bit, so let's head back up to the surface and make our way home. It's been a nice little dip into the ruins, hasn't it? Not too long, not too taxing, just enough to fill the pockets and remind ourselves what's down there waiting for another evening. Back at the workshop now, and we'll drop a good bit of this mechanical scrap into the recycler, let it work away while we sort through everything else we've picked up. Our inventory's getting rather full actually, so it might be worth building another storage chest or two, just to keep things tidy. We've got the wood for it, so let's pop over to the work table and knock one out, nice and simple. There we go, a proper chest, sitting neatly against the wall, and we'll start sorting things into it as we go, keeping the wood scraps together, the stone together, the metals in their own little section. I find I quite like this part of these games, actually. The tidying, the organizing, watching a chaotic pile of gathered resources slowly resolve itself into neat, labeled stacks. There's something almost meditative about it, in its own small way. Let's check on the recycler now, see what it's turned that mechanical scrap into. Ah, there we are, a handful of bearings, which is exactly what we needed for the crane lift. So let's gather up everything else the crane requires. We've got our bricks, our thick rope, our bearings now. We just need the wooden sticks and copper sticks, and we should have enough scrap sitting about to knock those out fairly quickly at the work table. There we go, wooden sticks done, and the copper sticks are cooking away now too. Another few minutes and we'll have everything we need. While we wait, let's have a bit of a wander around the yard, tidy a few things up, maybe move some of our furniture around, since Jan did send us a few nice pieces in the post when we first arrived, a lovely little tassel lamp, a cozy-looking sofa, that sort of thing, and it does give the workshop a bit more of a lived-in feeling once you've got them placed properly. We'll pop the lamp in the corner there and rotate it just so, and the sofa can go against the far wall. And honestly, it's starting to look rather homely in here now, isn't it? for somewhere that started off as little more than a dusty shed with a broken furnace and a very disappointed-looking mason standing in the doorway. Funny how quickly a place can start to feel like yours once you've put a bit of work into it. Alright, copper sticks are done, so let's gather up everything and head down toward where the crane lift needs installing. It's a fair walk, out past the scrapyard along the edge of the ruins, and we'll take our time getting there, no need to rush, stopping to tap the odd junk pile as we pass, since you never quite know what you'll find, and it seems a shame to walk past a good resource without at least having a poke at it. There we are, the installation point, right at the edge of this long drop down into the tunnel Rocky's crew has been working in. We'll place the crane down carefully, and it clicks into position with a satisfying sort of clunk, and that's one crane lift done, with Mion presumably working away on the second one somewhere else along the tunnel, though we won't see her finish hers just yet. I think this might be a good point for another little pause, actually, since we've just finished a proper chunk of building work, and it feels like a natural place to breathe for a moment. So let's just stand here a while, looking out over this long tunnel, listening to whatever faint machine sounds drift up from below, and not do anything at all for a minute or two. There's no harm in that. Sometimes the nicest thing you can do in an evening like this is simply pause. Right, let's carry on, gently. With the crane lift installed, we can head down properly now into the tunnel it services, which opens up a whole new stretch of the ruins for us to explore and harvest from. It's meant to have all sorts down there, according to Rocky. Old machinery, plenty of ore, and apparently some rather good scrap for building more advanced tools once we've got the reputation and resources to unlock the recipes. Let's take the lift down now, nice and slow, watching the walls of the tunnel scroll past as we descend, all these old cables and pipes still clinging to the rock, remnants of whatever this place used to be before the world changed. It's quiet down here, properly quiet, just the occasional drip of water somewhere off in the dark, and our own footsteps echoing gently against the stone. We're finding a good deal of scrap straight away, some proper metal junk piles, and we'll work through them steadily, tap, 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 watching the resources tick upward. There's tin ore here too, which combined with the copper we've already got will let us make bronze, once we've got a furnace advanced enough to smelt it properly, which ours can already manage, so that's rather handy. I keep finding my thoughts drifting, as they do, to small, unimportant things while we potter about down here. I was thinking about the rain, actually, funny thing to think about in the middle of a desert game, but I do like the sound of rain against a window, always have, and I was remembering a particular evening a few years back. Nothing special about it really, just sitting by a window with a book I wasn't really reading, listening to the rain, and feeling entirely content in a way that's hard to properly describe or recreate on purpose. I think the nicest moments are often like that, aren't they? The ones you can't quite plan for. They just arrive, quiet and unannounced, and you only realize afterward how good they were. We're going to keep working through this level for a while yet. There's plenty more scrap to gather, and our stamina's holding up all right for now. Let's tap a few more of these deposits, filling our pockets steadily with copper and tin both, and the occasional bit of stone besides. There's a treasure chest tucked away in the corner over there, half buried in rubble, so let's go and have a look at what's inside. Oh, lovely. A few extra bits of scrap and a small handful of gold. Not a huge find, but a welcome one all the same. We'll pocket that and keep moving, since there's always more to find if you're patient enough to look properly, poking into every corner rather than just rushing straight through the middle of a room. I think our stamina's getting fairly low now, so let's think about heading back up to the surface soon, maybe after we clear out this last little pocket of scrap over here. There we go, that should do it for tonight's dive into the ruins. A good haul all told, plenty of copper, some tin, a bit of gold, and a fair stretch of tunnel properly explored. Let's take the lift back up, nice and slow, and make our way home through the evening light, which is starting to properly settle into that lovely dusty gold color I mentioned earlier, the sun getting low over the dunes, throwing these long, soft shadows across the sand. It really is a striking little town at this hour, isn't it? All warm oranges and quiet corners, everyone starting to wind down for the evening, lanterns flickering on one by one along the main street. Back at the workshop now, and we'll spend a little while smelting through what we've gathered, turning that copper and tin into proper bronze bars, which is going to be useful for all sorts of upcoming projects, tools, furniture, all manner of things. Let's load up the furnace, nice and generous, and let it work away while we tidy up the yard a bit more. We've got a fair bit of loose scrap scattered about, so let's toss what we can into the recycler and sort the rest into our storage chests properly. It's satisfying work, isn't it, this sort of tidying, watching a cluttered little yard slowly resolve itself into something orderly, everything with its own place, everything accounted for. I think it might be time for another gentle tangent, since we've got machines ticking away in the background again and not much pressing to attend to just this moment. I was thinking about my neighbour's cat, actually, this enormous fluffy orange thing who insists on sitting on my windowsill most afternoons, staring in at me with what I can only describe as mild disdain, as though he's terribly disappointed in whatever I happen to be doing at the time. I've never so much as touched him, he won't allow it, keeps a very strict 2-meter boundary at all times, but he does seem to enjoy the company from a distance, and I suppose I enjoy his too, in a funny sort of way. There's something rather nice about a companionship that doesn't ask anything of you at all, isn't there? Just a quiet presence, now and then, watching the world go by together. Right, let's check on that furnace, see how our bronze is coming along. Ah, lovely. A good stack of bars now, more than enough to be getting on with. We'll want to think about what to make with it, perhaps some better tools, or some furniture pieces, since I did notice a few nice-looking bronze items available back at the Commerce Guild store that we haven't been able to afford or unlock just yet. Let's wander back over there now, see what's on offer, and maybe pick up a recipe or two if the price is right. There's a bronze axe pattern here, which would let us handle deadwood a bit more efficiently once we've got one made, and a few furniture pieces besides, a nice-looking storage chest, a wooden bookcase. We'll pick up what we can reasonably afford and leave the rest for another evening, since there's no need to spend everything all at once, is there? Better to leave a little something to look forward to. We're going to head back to the workshop now and put a few of these new recipes to use, starting with that bronze axe, since it'll make our future wood gathering a good deal smoother. There we go, one bronze axe, freshly made, and it does have rather a nice heft to it in the character's hands, don't you think? A proper little upgrade from where we started this evening. I think we've done a fair bit of building and harvesting so far tonight, and it might be nice to spend a little while just exploring the wider town now, since we haven't really said hello to everyone yet, and there's a fireside meeting later this evening that we ought to think about attending, since it sounds like it might be rather an important one. Let's wander down toward the Yak Mill Ranch first, since we haven't been out that way yet, and I understand there's all sorts of animals kept there. Proper big fluffy creatures, quite unlike anything you'd expect to find thriving out here in the desert, though apparently they're rather well suited to the heat, hardier than they look. There's a family who runs the place, Cooper and Mabel, and their daughter Elsie, who I gather is quite the character, always got some scheme or another on the go, though a well-meaning one, from what I've heard. We'll pop by and say a quick hello, nothing too involved. Just a friendly wave and a bit of small talk, the sort of pleasant nothing you exchange with someone you're still getting to know. Cooper seems a bit gruff at first glance, but not unkindly so. More the sort of gruffness that comes from working hard in difficult conditions for a long while, the kind that softens once you've earned a bit of trust. There's a wonderful view out this way too, actually, looking back toward town with the sun getting properly low now, And I think we might just pause here again for a moment, let the character stand still and take it in. No rush at all. We've got plenty of evening left, and sometimes the nicest thing to do with a view like this is simply look at it, without doing anything else besides. All right, let's carry on wandering, gentle as ever. We'll head back toward the center of town now, since that fireside meeting will be starting before too long, and I do think it's worth attending, if only to see what everyone gets up to when they're all gathered together in one place. There's Justice, the head of the Civil Corps, who takes his job rather seriously, bless him, always got one eye out for trouble even when there isn't any about. And there's Penn, who fancies himself the town's protector, quite dramatically so, always talking about toughness and training, though from what I understand he's mostly harmless, just terribly fond of a bit of theatre. We're gathering with everyone now near the town hall, and Matilda's up front, ready to say a few words, welcoming the new builders properly to the community, myself and Mion both, and it's rather a nice little moment, everyone clapping politely, a few kind words exchanged. Owen's brought out some food for everyone too, omelettes I believe, still warm, and it does all feel rather cozy, doesn't it? This whole little community gathered together at the end of a long day, nothing dramatic happening at all, just neighbors being neighborly. I think we might slow right down again here actually, since we're coming up on quite a bit of time now, and it feels like a natural place to just sit with the scene a while. So let's have our character linger near the edge of the gathering, not saying much, just listening to the low murmur of conversation drifting across the square, the lanterns flickering gently in the evening breeze, everything soft and warm and unhurried. Once the meeting wraps up, we'll wander back toward the workshop, and I think we might spend the rest of tonight's session on a proper bit of exploration, heading a little further out into the desert than we have so far, since there's meant to be all sorts of interesting little pockets scattered about beyond the immediate edges of town, old ruins half swallowed by dunes, the odd bandit encampment we'll want to keep well clear of for now, and plenty of resource nodes we haven't touched yet. Let's head out that way now, taking the long route, past the water tower, past the little bridge that crosses over toward the further reaches of the desert. It's proper dark now, or getting there, the sky shifting from that dusty gold into deeper purples and blues, and the stars are starting to come out properly overhead, more of them than you'd ever see back in a proper city, all this open sky just absolutely thick with them. We're finding a few new resource types out this way, some harder rocks that yield marble and bloodstone, and I do like the sound of bloodstone, rather dramatic for what turns out to be a fairly ordinary-looking reddish mineral. Nothing sinister about it at all, really, just a name someone must have chosen because it sounded impressive. We'll tap away at a few of these, gathering steadily, our pockets filling up nicely once again. There's a lovely stillness to the desert at night, isn't there? Even in a game like this, everything quiet and vast and a little bit lonely in the best possible way. Just the sound of our own footsteps in the sand, and the occasional distant call of some nocturnal creature we can't quite see. I think I might slow the pace right down for a good stretch here, since this feels like exactly the sort of scene meant for lingering in, not rushing through. We'll keep gathering, nice and unhurried, moving from node to node, tapping at rocks, kicking through the odd patch of scrub, watching the little numbers tick up in the corner of the screen. It really is a rhythm you can lose yourself in, isn't it? This sort of slow, repetitive collecting, no pressure attached to it at all, just the simple satisfaction of a pocket filling up bit by bit. I keep thinking, as we wander through this quiet moonlit desert, about how much I like the idea of a town that takes its time. Sandrock isn't in any hurry to be anything other than what it is, a small, dusty, patched-together sort of place, full of people getting on with their lives at their own pace. And there's something rather reassuring about that, I think, especially on an evening like tonight, when the whole point is to slow right down ourselves. Let's head a little further out now, since there's meant to be an old ruin out this way that we haven't properly explored yet, tucked into the base of a rocky outcrop a fair walk from town. We'll take our time getting there, gathering the occasional resource as we pass, and just enjoying the quiet of the desert at night, the stars overhead, the soft crunch of sand underfoot. There it is, up ahead, this half-collapsed structure poking out of the rock, all worn edges and shadowy doorways. We'll have a careful poke around, since there might be a few useful things tucked inside, though we won't push too deep tonight, mindful of our stamina and mindful too of keeping things nice and gentle for this session. No need to go chasing anything too taxing this late in the evening. We're finding a bit of old scrap in here, and a few crates that give up some useful materials when we open them. Nothing too exciting, but steady, reliable gathering all the same. There's a strange sort of quiet inside these old ruins, isn't there? Even a small one like this, like the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting for someone to come along and give the place a purpose again. I think we've had a good long look around now, so let's think about heading back toward town, taking the scenic route, past the oasis, which looks rather lovely at this hour, moonlight catching on the water's surface, throwing soft rippling reflections up onto the surrounding rock. We'll pause here again for a moment just to take it in, since it really is a rather beautiful little spot, tucked away at the heart of an otherwise harsh and unforgiving landscape. There's something rather poetic about that, I think, a proper pocket of gentleness right in the middle of all that heat and sand. And I do like to think that's rather how a lot of good things work, don't you? Small pockets of calm carved out carefully in the middle of everything else, protected and looked after, precisely because they're rare and precious. Now, before we head all the way back, I notice the wind's picking up a little out here, isn't it? That particular dry, gritty sort of wind that seems to carry half the desert along with it, and I do believe that means a sandstorm might be rolling in before too long. The game's rather good about warning you, actually. Everything starts to take on this hazy, golden-brown tint at the edges of the screen, and the townsfolk all start hurrying indoors, pulling scarves up over their faces, that sort of thing. So let's not panic about it. There's no danger in a little sandstorm, not really, just reduced visibility and a bit of trouble getting around. But I think it might be rather a nice thing to just let happen around us, since we're close enough to the workshop that we can duck inside and keep ourselves busy regardless. We'll make our way back now, a bit more briskly than before, though still not rushing exactly, just moving with a bit more purpose, the wind tugging at our character's coat as we go, sand beginning to swirl in little eddies across the path ahead of us. There's Burgess again, out checking the fences one last time before the worst of it hits, and he gives us a wave, tells us to get ourselves indoors, which we're already doing, so that's rather good timing on our part. Back inside the workshop now, and we can hear the storm properly starting to pick up outside. This low, steady howl against the walls, sand hissing against the windows every so often. It's rather a cozy feeling, isn't it? Being tucked away safe indoors while something wild and blustery carries on outside. The sort of feeling that makes you want to put the kettle on and settle in properly. I think I might actually do that now, if you don't mind. Just pop away for a moment and put my own kettle on, since I did mention that chamomile blend earlier, and I find myself rather in the mood for another cup. There we go. Just the click of the switch, and now we wait, same as our character's going to wait out this storm. While the kettle's heating, let's keep ourselves busy in here, since there's plenty we can do without needing to step back outside. The work table's right here, and we've got a fair stockpile of materials built up over the course of tonight, so let's think about what else we might craft while the wind does its thing beyond these walls. There's a proper bed we haven't made yet, actually, which does seem like rather an oversight for a builder who's been out here a little while now, sleeping, I presume, on whatever Mason left behind, which, if I recall, wasn't terribly much. Let's put a bed together now, nice and simple, Needs a bit of thin thread which we can spin up from plant fiber, and we've got plenty of that gathered from all our wandering earlier. There we go, threading it through, slow and careful, and then assembling the frame itself. And it's rather satisfying watching a proper piece of furniture take shape like this, isn't it, from a scattered handful of raw materials into something you could actually rest your head on at the end of a long day. We'll find a good spot for it, over there in the corner, away from the draft, and rotate it just so until it sits properly against the wall. There. Doesn't that look like a proper little home now, rather than just a workshop with some furniture scattered about? I think that's rather the nicest part of a game like this, isn't it? Watching a space slowly become somewhere you'd actually want to live, one careful placement at a time. My kettle's just gone off, so let's pause here a moment while I go and pour myself a cup. There we are. Settling back in now, tea in hand, and the storm's still going strong outside by the sound of it. That low, steady howl against the windows, and I find I rather like working through a game like this with a warm drink close by, don't you? Something about the ritual of it, the little sips between tasks, that makes an evening feel properly unhurried. Let's carry on with a bit more crafting while we wait this storm out. I think we might have a go at some of the tools we haven't upgraded yet, since we've got a fair bit of bronze sitting in storage now, more than enough to work with. There's a bronze pick hammer recipe available, which would be rather a step up from the stone one we started with, letting us break down tougher deposits and dig a bit deeper into those ruins without wearing ourselves out quite so quickly. We'll gather what we need, the bronze bars, a bit of wood for the handle, and put it together at the work table, slow and steady. There we go, one bronze pick hammer, and it does have rather a satisfying weight to it. Even just looking at the little inventory icon, doesn't it? The sort of tool that feels like it means business. We'll want to make ourselves a proper bronze axe to match, at some point, though I think we've got enough on the go for tonight already. So we'll leave that one for another session. The storm seems to be easing off a little now, the howling outside settling into more of a steady murmur, and I think if we peek out the window we might see the worst of it's already passed us by. These things tend to move through fairly quickly out here, from what I understand, all bluster and grit for a short spell and then gone again, leaving everything coated in a fine new layer of sand, same as before, just slightly rearranged. Let's step back outside now and see what's changed, if anything. There's Amira, sweeping sand off the front step of her shop, same as everyone else along the street, this sort of communal, unhurried tidying up that happens after every storm. From what I gather, everyone just quietly getting on with resetting their little patch of the world. We'll give her a wave as we pass, and perhaps stop for a proper chat this time, since we've only really said the briefest of hellos to her so far tonight. She seems in good spirits, despite the mess, tells us a little about her pottery, how she likes to work with local clay when she can get it, though it's not always easy to find good clay out in a place as dry as this. I think I'd rather like to try pottery myself, actually, someday. There's something appealing about working with your hands like that, shaping something out of raw earth. Though I imagine it's a good deal more difficult than it looks in the little clips you see online. Everyone making it seem so effortless, the wheel spinning smooth and even, when I suspect my own attempts would end up rather lopsided and sad-looking. We'll leave Amira to her sweeping and carry on toward the ruins again, since I think there's a bit more exploring left in us tonight, and the storm having passed means the visibility should be a good deal better than it was before. Let's head back toward Paradise Lost, taking the scenic route once more, past the water tower, past the little bridge, the sand still settling in soft drifts along the path from the storm that just passed through. There's a bit more scrap scattered about now, actually, stirred up by all that wind, so we'll take our time gathering as we go, tapping at the little piles that have blown in against the fences and walls along our route. It really is rather generous, this game, in how it keeps giving you little reasons to pause and gather, isn't it? Never quite letting the walk between destinations feel like empty time, always a little something worth stopping for. I keep thinking as we wander about how storms like that one, even a small in-game one, tend to leave things a bit rearranged, don't they? Whether it's sand in a desert or just the general shape of an ordinary week. I had one of those weeks recently, actually. Nothing dramatic, just a run of small things all landing at once, and by the end of it everything felt a bit like this desert does after a storm. All the familiar shapes still there but coated over, needing a bit of quiet tidying before it felt properly like itself again. I think that's rather why an evening like this one appeals to me so much, if I'm honest. This slow, steady sweeping up, one small task at a time, until things feel settled again. We've made it to the ruins now, and let's take the crane lift down once more, since there's meant to be a fair bit more to explore on this level that we didn't quite get to earlier. The tunnel's just as quiet as before, that same faint hum of old machinery somewhere in the depths, and we'll wander through slowly, tapping at whatever deposits catch our eye. There's a new sort of ore down here that we haven't seen yet tonight, a pale, silvery-looking stuff that I believe might be tied to some of the more advanced recipes we haven't unlocked just yet. We'll gather what we can of it regardless, since it never hurts to have a stockpile ready for whenever we do get around to those upgrades. Tap, 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 that same gentle rhythm as before, and I find I don't mind it at all, repeating the same motions over and over. There's something almost hypnotic about it by this point in the evening, the sort of repetitive task that lulls rather than tires. We're coming across a proper cluster of old-world crates now, tucked into what must have once been some sort of storage room, judging by the shape of the walls around it. All these neat rows of shelving, mostly collapsed now, but with just enough structure left to hint at what it used to be. We'll open each crate carefully, one at a time, and see what turns up. A bit of scrap here, a handful of gold there, and another data disk, which is rather lovely since we can bring that back to Chi along with the others we've already gathered tonight. I think we might go just a little deeper here since our stamina's held up rather well, all things considered, and there's meant to be a proper vein of copper somewhere further down this particular corridor, according to the little map marker that's just appeared. Let's follow it along, slow and careful, our lantern light, or whatever passes for it in this engine, catching on the old rusted pipework that lines these walls. There it is, a proper thick seam of copper ore, more than we've found in one place all evening, and we'll spend a good while working through it, tap, 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 watching our pockets fill steadily. This is rather the heart of it, isn't it, this whole Longplay, just settling into these little pockets of quiet, repetitive gathering, letting the evening stretch out slow and comfortable around us. No rush at all to move on to the next thing. I think actually this might be a good point for another proper pause, since we're deep into tonight's session now, and it feels right to just sit with the stillness of these old ruins for a moment before we carry on. So let's have our character simply stand here, pick hammer resting against a shoulder, listening to the quiet drip of water somewhere off in the dark, the faint hum of some ancient machine still ticking over after who knows how long. No need to do anything else for a little while. Just breathe and let the scene settle. If you're still with me, however drowsy you might be by now, I hope this has been a gentle sort of company tonight, the kind that doesn't ask too much of you, just sits alongside you while the evening wears on. And if you've already drifted off somewhere back there, well, that's exactly as it should be, and I'll keep talking softly for whoever's still listening. No harm at all in some of you resting while others carry on a little further with me. All right. Let's gently continue. We've gathered a good deal of copper now, so let's think about making our way back up to the surface, since we've got plenty to smelt down once we're home, and I do think we've explored a fair stretch of this level by now. We'll take the crane back up, slow and steady, watching the tunnel walls scroll past once more, and step back out into the cool night air above. It's properly late now, the stars thick overhead, the whole desert hushed and still after the storm that passed through earlier. We'll make our way back toward town, taking our time, and I think we might stop by the Commerce Guild one more time before we head home properly, since I noticed a commission board there that we haven't fully looked through yet tonight, and it seems worth checking what's on offer before we settle in for the rest of the evening. There's a few requests posted, someone wanting a batch of bricks, someone else after a bit of copper wire, nothing too demanding, and I think we've got more than enough materials gathered tonight to knock a couple of these out fairly easily. We'll pick up the brick request first, since we've got a good stockpile already, and just need to drop them off at the collection point marked on our map. Let's wander over there now, and there's a fellow waiting. Seems quite pleased when we hand the bricks over, tells us he's been needing them for a repair job on his roof. Apparently the last storm did a bit of damage, nothing too serious, but enough to need patching before the next one rolls through. We'll take our payment, and a bit of extra reputation besides, and carry on toward the next request. The copper wire one's a bit trickier, since we haven't actually made any wire yet tonight, but we've got plenty of copper bars to work with, and I believe there's a recipe for it back at our work table, so let's pop home and knock a batch out before delivering it. It really is a nice little loop, isn't it? Gathering, crafting, delivering, each piece feeding into the next, and I find it rather satisfying watching a whole evening's work connect together like that. Nothing wasted, everything eventually finding its use. Back at the workshop now, and let's get that copper wire started, feeding a few bars into the work table and watching them slowly draw out into thin, neat coils. While that's working, let's have a look at what else we might want to build tonight, since we've still got a fair bit of bronze and marble and bloodstone sitting in storage, more than we've quite found a use for yet. I think a proper storage rack might be worth putting together actually, something a bit more substantial than the simple chests we've already got, since our inventory is getting rather full again after tonight's exploring, and it would be nice to have somewhere a bit more organized to keep everything. Let's see what that requires. A bit of hardwood, some bronze fittings, nothing we can't manage with what we've already gathered. There we go, slotting the pieces together, slow and careful. And it does look rather handsome once it's finished, this sturdy little rack with proper shelving, much nicer than just another plain box tucked in the corner. We'll find a good spot for it against the back wall, and start sorting things into it properly, the oars on one shelf, the fibers and cloth on another, everything finding its place. I think I might take a moment here to just talk a little more about nothing in particular, since that does seem to be rather the spirit of these late stretches of the evening. I was thinking earlier about how I used to fall asleep as a child, actually, funny thing to bring up, but I remember quite specifically that I could never manage it lying flat on my back, always had to be curled up on my side, facing the wall, with one hand tucked up under the pillow, and I still sleep that way now, all these years later, entirely unchanged, and I do wonder sometimes what it is about certain habits that stick with us so completely, while other things change entirely without us noticing. I suppose there's something comforting in that continuity, isn't there? A little thread running all the way back to childhood that's never quite broken, no matter how much else has shifted around it. Right, let's check on that copper wire, see how it's coming along. Lovely, a good stack of it now, more than enough for the commission, with plenty left over besides for whatever else we might need it for down the line. Let's gather it up and head back out to make the delivery, taking the same slow, unhurried pace as we have all evening. There's the fellow who requested it, waiting patiently by the Commerce Guild, and he seems rather chuffed when we hand it over. Says it'll save him a trip all the way to the next town over, which apparently is where he'd normally have to go for supplies like this. We'll take our payment and a bit more reputation, and I think that's probably enough commission work for one evening, don't you? Actually, before we move on properly, I notice there's one more small request pinned to the board, something from Elsie over at the ranch. asking after a simple wooden fence panel, nothing terribly demanding, and since we're already stood here with a fair bit of wood in our pockets, it does seem a shame not to knock it out while we're thinking of it. Let's pop over to the work table one more time, nice and unhurried, and put a panel together, slotting the boards in neat and even, and there we are, one fence panel, ready to deliver. We'll wander over to the ranch now, the same gentle pace as always, past the water tower, past the little bridge, and there's Elsie, out mending something else entirely by the looks of it, some contraption or other that I couldn't quite name, tinkering away with a look of fierce concentration on her face. She seems delighted when we hand over the fence panel, says it's exactly what she needed to patch up the paddock before the animals wander off somewhere they oughtn't, and thanks us properly, warmly, in that easy, unfussy way people out here seem to have with each other. No ceremony to it at all, just plain, honest gratitude. I do like that about this town actually, now that we've spent a proper evening wandering through it, the way nobody seems to make a fuss over kindness. It's just sort of expected, woven into the ordinary rhythm of the place, the way you'd expect a neighbor to lend you a cup of sugar without needing to be thanked extensively for it afterward. There's something rather old-fashioned about that, in the nicest possible sense, a kind of community that doesn't need reminding to look after itself. We'll linger by the ranch a little while longer, since the animals do seem rather content at this hour. Most of them settled down for the night in their little pens, and there's a particular sort of peace to watching sleeping creatures, isn't there? Even digital ones, this soft rise and fall of breathing, the occasional twitch of an ear, everything about them saying quite plainly that the day is done and rest has properly begun. I think we might just stand here a moment and watch. No need to do anything else, just take in the stillness of it. Cooper's still up, it seems, doing one last round of the paddock before he turns in himself, and he gives us a nod as he passes. Not much for conversation this late in the evening, but a friendly nod all the same, the sort that says quite a lot without needing any words attached to it. We'll return the nod and carry on, wandering back toward the center of town now, taking the long way round, past the little cluster of houses where most of the townsfolk live, all dark now, windows shuttered, everyone tucked up for the night, same as we're about to be. I think it might be worth mentioning, since we're on the subject of quiet, settled things, that I've always found there's something particularly soothing about walking through a sleeping town, whether in a game or in real life. Don't you find that too? There's a stretch of road near where I live that I sometimes walk along late in the evening, when I can't quite settle my own thoughts enough for sleep, and there's something about all those darkened windows, all those people resting behind them, that makes the whole world feel gentler somehow, more forgiving, like everyone's collectively agreed to set their worries down for a few hours and simply rest. I don't know why that comforts me quite so much, only that it does, every single time. We're passing by the schoolhouse now, or what I believe might eventually become one, though I understand that's rather further along in the story than we've gotten to tonight, so we'll just admire the building from the outside and carry on. There's a lovely little garden tucked behind it. Someone's clearly been tending it with real care, neat rows of hardy desert plants that don't need too much water to thrive, and I think that's rather a nice metaphor for this whole town, isn't it? Learning to grow things that suit the place you're actually in, rather than fighting against it. Let's keep wandering, slow as ever, and I think we might swing by Owen's saloon one final time before we properly head home, just to see if the music's still going. Ah, there it is, though quieter now, just the faintest thread of a tune drifting out into the night. Someone playing something soft and slow on a guitar, the kind of song that doesn't need words to tell you exactly what it's about. We'll pause outside for a minute, listening, letting it wash over us the same way we let the earlier tune wash over us, and then we'll carry on. There's a fair few lanterns still lit along the main street, casting these warm little pools of light across the sand, and moths fluttering about them here and there, drawn in the way moths always are. And I do find something rather lovely about that too. This small, ordinary bit of nighttime activity happening quietly all around us while the rest of the town sleeps. Nothing dramatic, just moths and lanterns and the soft crunch of sand underfoot as we make our way home. We'll pass by the Civil Corps office next, dark and quiet. Justice presumably tucked up in bed, same as everyone else by now. His usual watchfulness set aside for a few hours at least. And there's the church, its windows glowing faintly from some small light left on inside. Matilda perhaps still up finishing whatever paperwork a minister has to finish at the end of a long day, though we won't disturb her, just admire the soft light spilling out onto the path as we pass. I think, actually, we might make one more small stop before heading properly home, since I noticed earlier that Vivi's tailor shop has a little bench out front, and it does look rather inviting at this hour, tucked under a small awning, sheltered from whatever breeze might still be drifting through after the storm. Let's sit there for a moment, just the two of us, character and narrator both, and take stock of the evening so far. We've done rather a lot tonight, haven't we, when you properly add it all up, though it's never felt rushed at any point, which I think is exactly as it should be. We built that recycler right near the beginning, and a furnace not long after, and a crane lift down by the ruins, and a proper bed, and a bookcase, and a storage rack, and we're partway through upgrading the furnace again as we speak, sitting there cooling in the workshop while we take this little detour through the sleeping streets. We've gathered stone and wood and copper and tin and marble and bloodstone and that pale silvery ore from deep underground, and turned a fair bit of it into bronze, into tools, into wire, into bricks. And we've explored properly too, down into Paradise Lost more than once, out to the Yak Mill Ranch, along the oasis at night, into that little cave tucked among the rocks, through a whole sandstorm and out the other side of it. It really has been a full sort of evening, hasn't it, in the gentlest possible way, nothing forced, nothing hurried, just one small task leading naturally into the next, the way a good, unstructured day tends to unfold when you let it. I think that's rather the whole appeal of a game like this, if I'm honest, and rather the whole appeal of an evening like tonight's session too, this permission to simply potter, without needing anything in particular to come of it beyond the pottering itself. All right, I think that really might be enough wandering for one night, don't you? Let's make our way back to the workshop now, properly this time, taking the last stretch of road nice and slow, past the final few lanterns, past the last sleeping houses, and home to where our little collection of built and gathered things is waiting for us, patient and quiet in the dark. Let's think about what else we might get up to before we properly settle in for the night. I fancy a bit more exploring, actually, since we haven't been out toward the further edges of the map yet, past where the road starts to break down into rougher, less traveled paths. There's meant to be all sorts out that way, old world ruins that haven't been properly catalogued yet, the occasional bandit encampment we'll want to steer well clear of, and apparently some rather interesting wildlife too, though nothing too dangerous, from what I understand, so long as we're sensible about it. We'll head out that way now, taking the long path around the edge of town, past the last few scattered buildings, and out into the open desert proper. It's rather beautiful out here at night, isn't it? The dunes rolling off in every direction under all that starlight. Everything cast in soft silvers and blues rather than the warm oranges of daytime. We'll keep our pace slow, gathering the odd resource as we pass, tapping at rocks, kicking through patches of scrub, watching the little numbers tick up steadily in the corner of the screen. There's a rock formation up ahead that catches our eye, this strange, almost sculptural-looking outcrop that seems a bit out of place against the otherwise flat expanse around it. And I do wonder if there's something worth finding tucked into its base. Let's wander over and have a look, taking our time, since there's no rush at all to reach it quickly, Better to enjoy the walk itself. Ah, there we are, a small cave entrance tucked into the rock, half hidden by a drift of sand that's built up against one side of the opening. We'll poke our head in carefully, and it looks to be a fairly modest little space, nothing too extensive, but there's a glint of something metallic further back that's worth investigating. Let's proceed slowly, mindful of our stamina, since we have been out and about for a good long while now tonight. There's a bit of old scrap in here, and what looks like it might have once been some sort of storage locker, long since rusted through, but with a few useful bits still salvageable from inside. We'll gather what we can, and I think that's probably enough for this little detour, since the cave doesn't seem to go much further, and we've got a fair collection of resources built up already tonight, without needing to push any deeper. Let's head back out into the open night air, and I think we might just wander for a while now without any particular destination in mind, simply taking in the scenery, the quiet, the vast open sky overhead. There's something rather lovely about a game that lets you do that, isn't there? Just wander without purpose for a stretch. No quest marker pulling you along, no commission waiting to be fulfilled. Just the simple pleasure of moving through a beautifully realized little world and letting it wash over you. I think we might pause here again, actually, for a proper long stretch this time, since we're getting well on into the evening now, and I suspect quite a few of you listening have already drifted off, which is exactly as it should be. So let's have our character simply stand here, out in the middle of this quiet moonlit desert, and not move at all for a good while. No gathering, no walking, just standing, breathing, looking up at all those stars. I'll keep talking, softly, for anyone still awake, but there's no need to follow along too closely now. Perhaps let your thoughts wander the way ours have been wandering all evening, from tea to gardens to childhood sleeping habits and back again, nothing important. Nothing that needs holding on to, just soft, drifting thoughts, the kind that lead naturally into sleep if you let them. The stars really are lovely in this game, aren't they? Whoever designed this particular stretch of sky clearly took their time with it. All these little clusters and constellations scattered overhead. And I do think there's something rather calming about looking up at a sky full of stars, real or digital. The sheer scale of it putting all our own small worries into a bit of proper perspective. Everything feels a little more manageable, doesn't it, under a sky like that? A little more bearable, a little more like it'll all be fine in the end. All right, let's gently carry on, whenever you're ready. We'll wander back toward town now, taking our time, the same slow, unhurried pace we've kept all evening. And I think once we're back we might do a final bit of tidying up before we properly call it a night. There's still a bit of scrap and ore scattered through our inventory that we haven't sorted properly, and it does feel like a nice way to wind things down, putting everything back in its place before we rest. We're passing by the oasis again on our way back, and it's just as lovely at this hour as it was before, the water catching what little light there is, throwing soft ripples up against the surrounding rock. There's nobody about at this hour, everyone tucked up safely indoors, and it does feel rather special, having this quiet little pocket of the map entirely to ourselves for a moment. No NPCs milling about, no commissions to think about, just the water and the stars and the soft desert breeze. Let's carry on toward the workshop now, and I think we're properly on our way to wrapping things up for tonight. We'll pass Jan's office on the way, dark and shuttered for the night, and I do wonder if he ever actually sleeps in there or just props his feet up on the desk until morning, though I suppose that's rather beside the point at this hour. We'll check our inventory now, and yes, we've got plenty of bronze bars, a good stack of bricks, marble, bloodstone, all sorts really. Let's think about what to make with it all. Perhaps a few more furniture pieces for the workshop, since a home does start to feel more like home the more you fill it with things that are properly yours, made with your own hands, or thumbs rather, out of materials you gathered yourself, one careful tap at a time. There's a nice-looking bookcase recipe we picked up earlier, so let's put that together now, and perhaps a proper wooden storage box or two as well, since we could always use more room to keep things tidy. There we go, the bookcase slots into place against the far wall, and it does add a rather nice bit of character to the room, doesn't it? Even if we haven't got any books to put in it just yet. I think it might be time for another one of those soft pauses, actually, since we're getting on well into tonight's session now, and it feels like the right sort of moment to just sit quietly with everything we've built and gathered so far. So let's have our character take a seat right there on that little sofa Jan sent us and just rest a while, the workshop quiet around us, the machines tick down for the evening, everything still and calm. No rush at all to get up again. We'll stay here a little while, just letting the scene breathe, the lanterns outside flickering gently in the dark, the distant hum of the town settling in for the night. If you're properly drifting off by now, that's wonderful. That's exactly what we're here for, and there's no need to keep listening if your eyes have already closed. I'll keep talking, nice and soft, for anyone still with me, but there's no pressure at all to stay awake for the rest. All right, let's gently continue. I think we'll spend the remainder of tonight's session on a bit more exploration, since there's still plenty of Sandrock we haven't properly seen yet, and a long play like this one really ought to wander through as much of it as we can manage, slowly, without any rush, just taking things in as we go. Let's head toward the research center now, since we've been gathering data disks all evening without doing much with them, and I do think Chi would appreciate having a few brought his way. It's a fair walk back into the heart of town, and we'll take it slow, stopping to admire the way the lanterns catch the dust in the air, giving everything this soft, hazy glow at night. There's the research center now, this sturdy little building tucked between the town hall and the civil corps office. All sorts of strange equipment visible through the windows, humming away even at this late hour. We'll head inside and hand over what discs we've collected, and Chi seems rather pleased about it, in his own reserved sort of way, promising us a new diagram or two once he's had a chance to properly study them. It's rather satisfying, isn't it, handing over the fruits of an evening's careful gathering and watching it turn into something new, a fresh recipe, a new machine to build, another little piece of the puzzle slotting into place. We'll leave him to his work now and wander back outside into the cool night air. I think we might do one more little loop around the town before we properly settle in for the rest of tonight, just to say goodnight to a few more of the folks we haven't properly met yet. There's Vivi, who runs the tailor shop, an older woman with a very gentle, grandmotherly sort of manner, and Hugo, the blacksmith, who seems terribly proud of his work, and rightly so, from what I've seen of it so far. We'll wander past the saloon one more time too, since there's usually a bit of music drifting out of there in the evenings, and yes, there it is, something soft and twangy, guitar and a bit of harmonica, the sort of tune that fits this dusty little desert town rather perfectly. We won't go in, not tonight. Just pause outside for a moment and let the music wash over us before we carry on. There's something rather special about a town at night, I think, in any game, but especially one like this, where everything's designed with such warmth and care, all these little glowing windows, the soft murmur of conversation drifting from the saloon, the stars overhead so thick and bright out here, away from any proper city lights. It makes the whole place feel lived in, doesn't it? Like a real community, rather than just a backdrop for our own little adventures. Before we get all the way there, though, I think there's time for just a little more pottering about, since I'm not quite ready to close things out yet, and I suspect a good few of you are still comfortably drifting along with me. Let's swing past the research center one more time, since we did gather a fair few data disks tonight. What with the ruins and that little cave out in the desert, and it seems worth handing them over to Chi before we properly settle in for the night. There's a light still on inside, which isn't terribly surprising. I imagine a mind like his doesn't switch off terribly easily. Always some new bit of old-world technology to puzzle over. We'll knock gently and step inside, and he looks up from whatever intricate little device he's been tinkering with, seems genuinely pleased to see the fresh batch of discs we've brought him, tells us it'll take him a little while to properly comb through them all, but promises a new diagram or two once he has. I think that's rather a nice way to end a session's worth of exploring, isn't it? Handing over a little collection of mysteries for someone else to puzzle through, trusting that something useful will come of it eventually, even if we don't see the result right away. There's a patience to that sort of exchange that I quite like, the not knowing exactly what you'll get back, just a general sense that good things tend to follow good work, given enough time. We'll leave him to it and step back outside, and I think, actually, we've got just enough energy left in the tank for one more proper building project tonight before we call it, so let's head back to the workshop and see what we can put together with everything we've gathered. Our storage racks are looking rather full now, aren't they? Copper and bronze and marble and bloodstone. More than enough to try our hand at something a bit more ambitious than we've attempted so far this evening. I think we might have a go at upgrading our furnace, actually, since a proper civil furnace, from what I understand, would let us smelt a wider range of materials, and do it rather more efficiently besides, which seems like a sensible investment, given how much time we've spent standing about waiting for things to finish cooking tonight. Let's see what it requires. A decent stack of bricks, some of that silvery ore we found down in the ruins, and a good few bronze plates besides. We'll gather everything up from our storage, laying it all out neatly by the work table, and begin the process, slow and careful, each piece fitting into place with a satisfying little click. There's something rather lovely about upgrading a machine you've already got installed, isn't there? Rather than building something from scratch. It feels a bit like renovating a room in a house you already love, keeping the bones of what worked while making it just that bit better suited to what you need now. While we wait for the upgrade to finish, let's have another little tangent, since it does seem to be the shape of this evening by now, doesn't it? Work and rest and wandering thoughts, all folded in together. I was thinking about libraries, actually, of all things, how I used to spend whole Saturday afternoons as a teenager just wandering the shelves of my local one without any particular book in mind, just pulling things down at random, reading the first page, putting them back if they didn't catch me. And I don't think I've done that in years now, mostly because everything's so easy to look up and choose deliberately these days, but there was something rather nice about that aimless sort of browsing, letting a book find you rather than the other way around. I do wonder if I should start doing that again, actually, next time I've got a free Saturday with nothing particular planned. There's a certain kind of magic in not knowing quite what you're looking for, I think, and finding it anyway. Let's check on that furnace upgrade now. Ah, lovely, it's finished, and doesn't it look rather grand, this sturdy new civil furnace sitting where the old one used to be. All sorts of new smelting options available to us now that weren't there before. We'll load it up with a bit of that copper we gathered earlier and set it working, watching the little progress bar tick along steadily. I think, while that's cooking, we might spend a few minutes just tidying the workshop up properly, since it has gotten rather cluttered over the course of tonight's session, bits and pieces scattered here and there that never quite made it into a proper storage spot. Let's go around, nice and unhurried, picking up loose scrap, tucking away spare tools, straightening the furniture we placed earlier so it all sits just so. There's the bed, over in its corner, and the bookcase against the far wall, and that storage rack we built a little while back, all looking rather tidy now, the sort of space you'd actually want to come home to after a long day out in the ruins. I think I might rearrange the lamp slightly, actually, just to catch the light a bit better in the evenings. There, that's nicer, throwing a warm little glow across the room, rather than off into the corner where it wasn't doing much good at all. It really is satisfying, this sort of quiet domestic tidying, isn't it? Even in a game, maybe especially in a game where there's no real consequence to getting it wrong, no rush, just the simple pleasure of making a space feel a bit more considered, a bit more yours. I find myself doing this in my own home too, actually. This same sort of late evening tidying, moving a cushion here, straightening a picture frame there. Nothing that needs doing exactly, just the quiet satisfaction of a space settling into order before you settle into rest yourself. Let's check on the furnace once more. Getting there, not quite finished yet, so let's use the remaining time to have one last little wander outside, just around the immediate yard, since I don't think we're quite ready to head all the way back out into the desert again tonight. But a short stroll around our own little patch of Sandrock does seem rather appealing. We'll step outside, and the night's properly settled in now, cool and quiet, the storm from earlier long since past, leaving the air feeling rather fresh and clean in its wake, the way it sometimes does after weather like that, everything washed clear of whatever dust had been sitting heavy before. There's a nice little bench just outside the workshop door, and I think we'll have our character sit there for a while, resting, looking out over the yard, the recycler humming softly nearby, the crane lift visible in the distance down toward the ruins. Everything we've built and gathered tonight laid out quietly around us. I think this might be a good moment for one more proper pause, actually, perhaps the longest one yet, since we're getting well on into the small hours now, and I imagine most of you listening are either fast asleep already or very nearly there. So let's just sit here a good while, our character resting on this bench, the workshop quiet and settled around us. Nothing more to do tonight than simply be still. If you're still with me, thank you, truly, for staying this long, and if you've drifted off already, well, that's exactly what tonight was for, and I hope it's been a peaceful sort of drifting. Nothing sudden, just a slow, gentle settling into sleep, the way sand settles at the bottom of a glass of water when you finally stop stirring it. We'll let the furnace finish its work in its own time, no need to hover over it, and I think, once it's done, we might call it a night properly, tuck our character in, tuck ourselves in too, wherever we happen to be listening from. There's just something so soothing about a finished project sitting quietly in the dark, isn't there? Whether it's a furnace cooling down after a long evening's work, or a garden bed freshly weeded and watered, or a room finally tidied after weeks of putting it off. There's a particular kind of rest that comes after a bit of honest effort, a rest that feels earned rather than just given, and I think that's rather what we've built toward all evening, this slow accumulation of small, unhurried tasks, each one adding up to something worth resting after. Let's check the furnace one final time. There we go. Finished. A good stack of properly smelted bars sitting ready and waiting whenever we next pick this save file back up. We won't do anything more with them tonight, just let them sit there, patient, same as everything else in this little workshop, waiting for tomorrow's session, whenever that might be. Let's head back to the workshop now, since I think we're properly winding down for tonight, and it feels like the right time to tuck our character in for the evening too, in keeping with the spirit of everything we've been doing. We'll pop inside, past the sofa, past the bookcase, past all the little pieces of furniture we've gathered and built over the course of tonight's session, and settle in for a rest. Before we do though, let's just take one last look around the yard at everything we've accomplished tonight. The recycler humming quietly, the furnace cooled down now after all that smelting, the neat little rows of storage chests, each one properly sorted, the crane lift installed down by the tunnel entrance, ready for tomorrow's work. It's been a good, steady sort of evening, hasn't it? Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed, just building and harvesting and a bit of gentle exploring, exactly as promised. I think that's about where we'll leave things for tonight. We've built a fair bit. Our recycler, our furnace, a couple of storage chests, that crane lift down by the ruins. We've harvested a good deal too, plenty of stone and wood and scrap, copper and tin turned into proper bronze, marble and bloodstone tucked away for future projects. And we've explored a fair stretch of the map besides, down into the tunnels below Paradise Lost, out toward the Yak Mill Ranch, along the quiet moonlit edges of the desert, and back again through the warm lantern light of the town itself. Sandrock's still got plenty more to show us, of course. More ruins to dig through, more people to properly get to know, more of that story bubbling away somewhere beneath the surface that I understand gets rather more involved the further in you go. Though we've kept well clear of anything too dramatic tonight, on purpose, since that's not really what this sort of evening is for. Thank you so much for spending this time with me tonight, whoever you are, wherever you're listening from. I do hope it's been a gentle sort of company, the kind that asks nothing of you at all, just sits quietly alongside you while you drift off. If you enjoyed tonight's wander through Sandrock, I'd be ever so grateful if you left a little like on your way out. It really does help this small channel more than you'd think, and if you'd like to hear more of these long, slow sessions, do think about subscribing too, so you'll know whenever a new one's ready. For now, though, I think it's time to say good night. Sleep well, whoever you are, wherever you are. Let the sand settle, let the lanterns dim, let the whole dusty little town of Sandrock rest easy until we come back to it again. Good night, and thank you, truly, for letting me talk you gently off to sleep tonight.